Hello loves, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about ancestor work a little bit and ancestry, okay, because it's really important for us to talk about that, getting to know your ancestors, getting to know your ancestry, and how do we do that. So for this, it's really super important that we do our ancestry DNA. The reason being is because, you know, culture in the world, you know, things have been moving around. A lot of people got moved around. A lot of people are, you know, like misplaced or, you know, born into certain things and have a longing to reconnect to certain parts of their history and their culture that, you know, unfortunately through time has gotten lost or there has been a separation. So when we look at our ancestors and we do ancestor meditations and we, you know, venerate our ancestors, who are we working with? Where do they come from? What are their histories? All of these different types of things. It's so important for us to, you know, dive in deeper into that conversation and dive in deeper to our ancestors, so that way we understand their point of view. We understand a little bit about their cultures. We understand a little bit about their history. We understand a little bit about how they guide us, because we know where they come from. Okay, and this is why I'm going to recommend to everyone to get a DNA test. Now, DNA tests are not going to tell you where you are indigenous to. And the word indigenous means that you originate naturally from that place. So for example, I am Afro-indigenous. That's how I personally identify, even though I am Dominican, but I identify as Afro-indigenous because a couple of reasons. The first one is that my West African ancestors and my Taino ancestors both were tribal people, and they both have tribal practices. They both built a bond together in the islands. They both got along really well. My Taino ancestors showed my West African ancestors how to work the lands, plant medicine, what to eat, even on a spiritual level, which points in the islands were high vibrational and held a lot of power. This is why the ceiba tree, which is sacred to Tainos, is also used in ATRs in the Caribbean. ATRs meaning African traditional religions, such as Haitian Voodoo, such as Santeria, such as 21 divisions, all of these things. The ceiba tree, which is known by different names in the islands, is still used today, and those trees were used by the Tainos. So there was like this bond that came through with my African and my Taino ancestors, and it's just a beautiful bond. So I celebrate that. But the other thing is that my Iberian ancestors from Spain, they're not indigenous to Spain. They're not indigenous to the Iberian Peninsula. Iberian peoples are actually originated in North Africa. That's where I get my North African DNA from. And so that's also where I get my North African ancestors from. So it's important to dive in deeper into your ancestry, because a lot of people within the community, especially those who are not spiritual but are very socially political, like to kind of poke at people from the Caribbean and be like, oh, you just want to identify with your white side. And I know a lot of people are racist and colorist in the islands. You don't got to tell me. It's literally all over this damn continent, all over the damn world. But when it comes to me as a spiritual person, I have healed my colonial trauma. A lot of people have not, and it's a problem. It's a problem because a lot of people project their own traumas, their own colonial trauma that they haven't sorted out, onto other people, and they see it as, oh, why are you okay with your white side? I get that question often, where I make ancestor work videos on my TikTok, and people are like, why are you okay with that? I'm like, because I healed it. I work with my Iberian ancestors. And the other thing that people don't understand, that nobody understands, nobody talks about, is the fact that all of your white ancestors weren't colonial. Okay, I have ancestors from my Iberian side that had nothing to do with colonization, and people don't understand that because they don't understand ancestor work. Okay, there's literally a couple of my ancestors, I can count them in the palm of my hands, that had anything to do with colonization, especially in the Americas. The rest of them did not. I mean, there's some that did some things because the Iberian Peninsula was attacked, and migrated. That's why I have the North African ancestry, because it just, historically, it's a very long story, but there's ancestors that I have personally gained from my Spanish, like my Iberian ancestors, that had nothing to do with colonization, had nothing to do with Columbus, had nothing to do. The other thing is that people don't separate the king, like the government, from the people. There's a difference between the government and the people. Did the Spanish people all agree into colonizing the Americas? I'm pretty sure a lot of them didn't even know what was going on. And the family members of the person who actually did the thing had nothing to do with the thing. And now they're part of my ancestors. So when I do my ancestor meditations and I see, you know, all of these different faces, they're not carrying colonial trauma on their side because they had nothing to do with it. And a lot of people don't understand that. And it's really weird to me that people don't put those two things together. But a lot of people don't understand that. Not all of your white ancestors had anything to do with colonization. I'm just saying. And a lot of people have colonial trauma that they need to heal badly. But anyway, doing your ancestry helps you understand a lot about, not only about yourself, a lot about your ancestors as well. Things that they want to eat, things that they, you know, areas of land. I do a lot of grid work and land work because I work a lot with nature spirits, and I am very much gravitated to land itself, which is why when I'm in the islands, I feel the energy of the land and the nature spirits. Even when I was in Mexico, I was doing work with nature spirits. It's just, I feel the energy of the lands. Same as when I went to Africa, I felt the energy of the lands. It's like so many different things. Like same when I went to Spain, the energy of the land was actually very neutral. There was like a very neutral, like chilling vibe when it came to Spain's like land energy, which I thought was really interesting. Anyway, that's a video for another day. My point is that it's important to understand the histories of the peoples that you come from. And doing your ancestry, doing your DNA helps you better to understand certain where you originate from, where your ancestors come from. So when you do your meditations, you understand who you're even talking to, okay? Now, ancestry and DNA are not going to tell you what tribes you come from, unfortunately, but it still gives you a good starting point into like an open conversation into you doing the work after that. So let's say, for example, I have the majority of my West African ancestry is from Nigeria. But I also have like other ancestry as well within West and Central Africa. The other thing about like colonization is that Spain was a different colonial power than England. Spain actually kept records of what tribes they were taking people from, versus when England was taking people from Africa and bringing them over here, they didn't keep any records. And this is why the colonial trauma in the United States is real bad, real bad. The other thing is that the United States didn't, like England didn't, there was a separation and the segregation, obviously. So natives were put into reservations. White people wanted to do their own thing, and then, you know, Africans were like put into slavery. There was no mixing in North America, but everywhere else where Spain was at, Spain had a different mentality. Spain said, we want claim to these lands. So what we're going to do is that we are going to marry the native people. And this is where you get the term mestizo. We're going to marry the native people so we can have claim to the land. Because if you marry a native person, then obviously you have a right to stay in that area. But then your children have a right to stay in that area. So there was a different, Spain is different. Spain is different, y'all. Iberians were different people. But yeah, so Spain was a different colonial power, and so this is why, you know, Latin America and Latin Americans are mixed. We're very heavily mixed. We have, you know, our ancestries are very, very heavily mixed. And so this is where you get that history from, where North America, oh, England, y'all had to be, they they were just, I can't say the words. I really want to curse them out, but I can't say the words. Anyway, England was just, unfortunately, did a lot of horrid things, and British people did a lot of horrid things. And so the trauma within the United States is a lot different. But when you're trying to reconnect, there's a whole entire movement right now for reconnecting natives in the Americas. So people are trying to connect back to their indigenous cultures. Again, indigenous meaning where you originate from. And this, for me personally, this is something I've done for a really long time. I've always known, because I grew up, my mom's side of the family is literally all mestizo, so half Taino, half Spain. Like my whole mom's side of the family is mestizo. My dad's side of the family is where I get my African ancestry from. That's where you get this fro from. But it's interesting because I grew up on my mom's side of the family, learning like all of the plant medicine in the islands and all of these things that, like, as I grew up and as I questioned things, I was like, wait, where does this come from? Where do these practices come from? All of it was indigenous, all of it was Taino. And so as we kind of dive into, you know, knowing who you are and diving into your community, one of the things that I personally did as I got older too is that I didn't neglect my other side. And this is what I mean by I already healed my colonial trauma. I looked into my Iberian ancestry, and I look into when I would do my ancestor meditations years and years and many years ago, I would see different faces, different styles of the way they would dress, and I would question them. I'd be like, where do you come from? Where do your peoples come from? And I would have these conversations with the ancestors so I could get to know them, because it's so important to get to know whose blood you're carrying, okay? And so when I was doing understanding my West African ancestors, it was so beautiful because they're so supportive, and they have, again, a very similar belief system when it comes to indigenous and the tribal mindset as my Taino ancestors. That's why I'm proud to call myself Afro-indigenous, because my Iberian ancestors are not indigenous to Iberia. They come from North Africa. They lost a lot of the indigenous culture because they've evolved into different peoples today. You know, they're just different peoples. So they're not indigenous peoples, and they don't have indigenous belief systems or anything like that. But my African ancestors do, and my Taino ancestors do. That's why even we're working with nature, working with animals, the spirituality, all of these things, the trees being sacred, all of these type of things, very, very similar. And it's so important for me to honor that about them. So that's why I personally dive into ancestor work. I personally dive into my ancestors, dive into where they come from, dive into the different belief systems, the practices, the lands, how it makes me feel today, what I need to heal, what has been passed down generationally, what trauma has been passed down. You have to know where you come from to do that. And so when you start off, you get a DNA test, you can see generally the area, and then you can say, okay, let me learn about this area, let me learn about Ghana, let me learn about those people, let me learn about the people that are there, the cultures, the practices, the belief systems, the herbal medicines, the plant medicines, all of these different things. Let me learn so that I can reconnect, and so that I can honor my ancestors properly, so that I can work with those ancestors properly. So we're gonna dive into what being a reconnecting native is, and how to go on that journey. But this is the first step. And so I wanted to make this video as a support, to support everybody, to, you know, hopefully let this be a kind of open door, open, you know, having an open mind to wanting to dive into ancestor work properly, because, you know, so much has been stolen that it's now time for us to do the legwork to recoup a lot of the things. And we can do that through the ancestors. There's readings too. You can literally go to Nigeria, get an ancestral reading. They will tell you who your ancestors are. It's not, there's so many different belief systems and medicines, and y'all, there's so much knowledge there that we just need to seek for it so we can find it, and ask the ancestors to guide us to that as well, so we can understand and feel comfortable and heal a lot of the colonial trauma that we all have accumulated collectively, y'all, because let me tell you. Anyway, that's pretty much wrapping up what I wanted to say. I hope that, you know, this opened up conversation or, you know, some sort of fire in you to dive into your ancestry, especially if you're starting to do ancestor work. You should know where your peoples come from and their practices, and feeling what resonates when you learn about these things as well. Yeah, I will see you loves in the next video. Have a very, very beautiful day.